morning to all participants. I would like to thank you all for being here today. It's a big honor to have been invited by MIS Mexico, and although this is a virtual symposium, it remains a big challenge for me to speak after the most remarkable guru of aesthetics. I'm from Oporto, a beautiful city in the north of Portugal. It's a small city, but very well known for the famous port wine. Today, we will be talking about guided surgery. It's not quite a new subject. If we make a quick research into Google, we will find about 126 million results, and if we specifically search for implant-guided surgery, we will find 10 million results. Actually, what brings me here to talk about this issue, if this subject is not that recent. I can compare, for example, with the cloud concept. Until recently, we only thought about it in terms of a weather issue, isn't it? In the same way, the concept of guided surgery evolved enormously since the introduction of the first guides. That all dentistry has changed. Current trends and technologies have changed completely our workflow. Digital world has come to stay and altered not only the way we do our diagnosis, we plan our cases, but also the way we execute our treatments. In the same way that Apple decided to change the way we consume music when they introduced the first iPod. Actually, we stopped buying CDs and started buying music virtually. In the same way that Uber dared to alter the people transportation market with a simple app. Have you realized that this company transports millions of people all over the world every day without owning a single car? In dentistry, we are facing now a dilemma: analogic versus digital. So, we should pose three questions: when, how, and why we should use guided surgery. Yes, because all of us are fully proficient in placing freehand implants, no? So, is it fair for us to think, why should I start to use guided surgery? Let us start with why. Why should we move forward a digital workflow, and why guided implant surgery? Basically, for a reason. For me, it's an excellent tool for achieving consistency of results. What we have today allows us to be predictable, and this predictability and consistency of results is the path to elaborate a standard protocol. This is the key to always deliver a clinical result of the highest level. So, I can point out a lot of advantage of the guided surgery compared to the conventional one. Let us talk about that. It's a very precise surgical procedure. I know that my implant will be placed in the exact 3D position that I have planned in advance. I will also be less invasive and act in a predictable way concerning the final prosthetic results. And since the surgical procedure is simpler and quicker, I will spend less chair time. It can also help me in terms of informing my patients and also as a marketing tool. In the end of the day, I can say it's a more relaxed solution. The guide is there, so no chance of error. Well, there is. If you fail to plan, then you will surely fail on the final outcome. In that particular field, there is no guide to substitute human knowledge. Summarizing, what we have at hand nowadays is something very precise, which reduces dramatically the chance of failure, because with guided surgery you are less exposed to human error. Let's start with some clinical cases. These patients all had a full fixed maxillary rehabilitation and wanted to do the mandibular. She already had a correct occlusal plan, so it was easier for me to plan the lower jaw rehabilitation. I've decided to place the implants with a guide. I used the M guide from MIS. This is the surgical step. This is the OPG taken after the surgery. I would like to point out an issue. Guided surgery doesn't mean flapless surgery. I don't recall making guided flapless surgery in the most recent times. Nowadays, we know the importance of the keratinized tissue around the implants concerning long-term stability. As such, I consider that there are only a few situations when we can go flapless. In this particular case, I've planned to place my implant 1 millimeter below the vestibular part of the mandibular ridge and 2 millimeters below the lingual part. And look here, we can notice the accuracy of the technique and the predictability of the result just looking at this photo. This is the rehabilitation with millet zirconia. Here we have the initial situation again and the final result. Until now, what I have showed you was the clinical part of the work. Now, I would like to go deeper and show how we got here. What's behind the surgery? I'm about to show you a little more on this process. Let's get to it. So, what do we need to elaborate a guide? Okay, we need the STL file and a DICOM file. From my intraoral scanner, I get my STL file. Well, and what if we don't have a scanner in your office? What we have to do is to take a silicone impression and send it to our lab. They can make a scan, or we can send the cast model directly to the M center, and with this they will be able to obtain the desired STL file. If I have to take an impression, it has to be using polyether or polyvinyl siloxane. Otherwise, we will be introducing factors that will decrease the quality of our record. And if we have a mock-up or a wax-up, we can also send it with an STL file at this point. Okay? Now, we can join the DICOM file. The DICOM file is acquired through our CBCT or CAT scan. So, here we can choose between two different situations. We can plan ourselves the position we want for our implants in the M-Soft. If we have the license and if we have time to do it, it's very simple. If we have time for this, it's okay because it's a very intuitive software. If you don't have time, you can do the same as I do. That is to send it to the nearest M center and have them do it. In my cases, I used to work with Granada M Center in Spain. They send me a small video with the planning so that I can make the approval of the plan or ask for some changes. If there is some changes that have to be done, normally we make a Skype call and submit those changes. Only after our OK, the guide is printed. Like I told before, M-Soft is a very intuitive software. First, I start by importing the DICOM file. We can see the exam according to the sagittal, coronal and axial planes, and we can prepare paraxial cuts that are perpendicular to our alveolar bone and adjust them to the mandibular or maxillary processes. Now I import my STL file. If I have a wax-up or a mock-up, I can also import it, the file here. And here, at this time, I already had imported both files. I have to blend them. For that, we need to choose 3 points to calibrate the automatic overlap of the images. We can overlap how many layers as needed. If we have a wax-up or a mock-up, we can do it here also. And this overlap has to be manually confirmed to be sure they are perfectly paired in the 3 planes of space, as we can see here in this video. In this case, since it's a lower jaw, I'm going to point out the lower alveolar nerve path. We can see here the alveolar nerve path. I choose the implant from the library, and now we can position the first implant. After placing the first implant with the touch of a button, I can automatically create the perfect parallelism between all of the followings. It is exported, for instance, with EasyCAD, and it's printed together with the oral model. And after disinfection, it's ready to use. So, now we move on to the final question. When? When we can use guided surgery? In my opinion, it should be used always, as often as possible. It's easier to think in a reverse way, from finish to start. The correct way of thinking is to think from the tool to the implant. The digital protocol helps us in that way. And the guided surgery gives us an added value to let us achieve the best functional and aesthetic results. In a simple crown cases or in a full arch rehabilitation, I will always have as a guide my final prosthetic result. But of course, there are many kinds of guides we can follow, so let's see. In this case, for example, I did a conventional prosthetic-driven implant surgery. This kind of guides have been used for a long time as an orientation for our freehand surgeries. I'm not getting deep with details on this case because it's not the subject of this conference. This case was an accident during a football match. As a result, he had the avulsion of the 11 with the loss of the vestibular cortical plate and the root fracture of 12. The OPG was made and appeared to show something more in the middle line. That CAT scan confirmed the presence of a mesoevents. So I started by extracting the 12th, leaving the apical third, and leaving the healing of the tissues without pressure. After 2 months, we can see the horizontal and vertical defects. Moving forward each time to the surgery, remove the mesiodent and the apical third of the 12, and also the bone graft. Here you can see the bone lost. Okay. I used a tunnel technique, which is less invasive, to collect some bone chips with a bone scraper. And I used also cyanogenic bone to mix with our gold standard, that is 50-50 with autologo, and a PTFA membrane fixed with pins. It's a vertical augmentation, so after 9 months we reopening to make the implant placement. Okay, and here at the time I used a prosthetic guide just to orientate the freehand placement of my implants. We can see that even with the orientation of the prosthetic guide, there is some difference, not as accurate as the fully guide. Yes? To make up for the fact that I haven't used a surgical guide for the placement of the implants, at that time I used a positioning guide for my implant supported provisional. This is the mesh mixer planification of the printed provisionals. My dear colleague João Fonseca did the planning according to my indications and printed them. We left a 2 mm space between the implant and the crown. This gap corresponds to the height of the connect abutment. And we also planned the crowns to be convex here for 2 reasons. Firstly, we are already working on the critical contour of my provisional, and secondly, because if it's necessary to turn that part a little more concave, it's easier to cut than to have. Here, the planning of the provisional positioning guide. We can see here that we have planned the provisionals with more volume on the palatal side. In this case, we need to open a little more to fit the provisional cylinder. It's easier for me, and there is no risk of fracture. Okay, so let's go back to the subject with this case. The full guided implant surgery is totally different from what I did in the previous case. And this is one of my favorite areas to use this kind of guides, the aesthetic zone of maxilla. And here we have infection and a vertical fracture of the 21 with loss of the vestibular bone wall. Here is this axial image. We can see this blue arrow showing the bone lost and the red line the bone level. With this, I was able to know that I have to perform a bone graft, but it didn't stop me from choosing a guided surgery for this implant placement. In this case, the position of the final crown was planned taking into account the initial situation. With the MSoft, it's very easy to blend both files before and after extraction. And now that I have my crown position, I can choose the implant position accordingly. Here, now I choose my implant diameter and height. I plan to use an intermediate abutment, 2 millimeters connect, and I fill it the gap with particulate bone and a CTG after the implant placement. And here, in this particular case, I used the PMMA Maryland bridge as a provisional because I didn't have enough primary stability to do an immediate implant loading. So even though I didn't use a screwed provisional, I would like to focus on the importance of the root shape. For the choice of our provisional, looking forward to obtain the correct emergency profile. For that, we have to choose the provisional crown with the same shape of section of the original tool. This one is triangular. As Victor Clavijo shows in his article, it is very important to maintain the tissue architecture, and with this digital protocol we can do that easily. With this software we are able to use a virtual scan body to allow my lab to prepare a fixed provisional. Here you can see 4 months after the surgery, already with the screwed retained provisional that was planned at the time of my guide, the same time as the guide. And if we need to adjust the emergency profile, we can do some adjustments on the provisional crown. Like Oscar Gonzalez showed in his article, we can alter the volume or height of the gingiva margin by changing the concave subcritical zone or the convex critical contour of my provisional. In this case, since I used a connect abutment, it will help me to define the subcritical contour. With this abutment, I'm able to work far from the bone and make the necessary adjustments to my provisional as many times as I see fit, without risk of injuring the tissues. Here you can see the X-ray from the different stage of the case. And this is the final outcome. One more case of central incisor fracture by trauma in patients with an open bite. In this case, it was the radicular fracture of the 11. The patient appeared with the crown fixed with composite on the adjacent teeth, in the vestibular and the palatal zone. And here's the OPG before the surgery. And here's the planning of the case with MSoft. It's so important to prepare the case before the surgery, and nothing better than guided surgery to be sure that everything will be as we planned. And then guided surgery, it's very important to prevent unexpected problems. Nowadays we know that there is no need of using large diameter implants. Here I choose a 3.9 by 13 millimeters V3 implant so that I can achieve a good apical primary stability. And I also choose a 2 millimeter connect. I love to use this intermediate abutment in post-extractional cases because I can select the right height accordingly to the clinical situation. Curiously, this case was made with the first generation of Connect, and it wasn't available in the MSoft library. That's why I had to choose a 2 mm multi-unit in my simulation. So I planned the placement of the implant 4 mm below to the gingival margin. Therefore, the connect would stay 2 mm from the gingival margin. Here we can see that the form of the section of the root is oval, and that I have to do a bone and a connective tissue graft. We can also see the fracture of the root and the loss of the vestibular bone wall. I asked my lab to do a provisional Maryland bridge since I didn't believe I couldn't do an immediate loading on this case. The PMMA gives me an extremely polished surface, which is excellent for the stability of the soft tissue. And so now it's everything prepared to start the surgery. Let's see. Here the removal of the Maryland provisional, and you can see here the perfect fit of the guide, and also the perfect fit of the drills to the sleeve while drilling. The first drill and the second. And now it's time to place the implant. Okay. And there it is. Okay. Here we can see the perfect positioning of the implant. And here we can notice the perfect fit of the guide and the bone gap to be filled. In this short video you can see the harvesting of the free gingival graft. The epithelium is removed from the graft so that we can use only the lamina propria, that is the best part. And moving on the surgery, after the positioning of the free gingival graft and the bone graft, it's time to place the connect abutment. This intermediate abutment must be tightened with 30 newtons. Opposite to my expectation, I was able to get primary stability, so I did an immediate loading. That's why In this case, I used the cervical VPI system. I didn't have a provisional crown prepared for this case, and this system helped me to copy the oval shape of the root. And we know that this area is the critical contour. It's very important, particularly in an immediate implant. So here you can see the aspect after the surgery. I would like to say that I made a mistake. This arrow points at the gingival fenestration that was made during this procedure. 6 weeks after, I saw that the fenestration is still there, and if I did nothing, there would be a big risk of implant and bone graft failure. So I strongly believe that we should always turn our mistakes into learning opportunities. We should not be afraid of making mistakes, but we should use them to outdo ourselves and evolve. I decided to move on to a minimal invasive treatment. I used the modified VISTA approach. I prepared a split thickness tunnel flap and used a connect tissue graft from the tuberosity to seal the fenestration. And this is the healing after 10 days. Three months after, it's time to move to the final rehabilitation. Here is the X-ray of the initial situation, and after 3 months from the tunnel surgery, where we can see the bone stability. This is the peri-implant profile. We decided to close the existing diastemas and also to camouflage the open bite. The profile will be improved by doing some changes during the provisional phase. This is the rehabilitation, and here the final outcome. And now I would like to share with you why I love not only guided surgery but specifically M-guides. First of all, it has an open frame design that is useful for me to see exactly what I'm doing. It allows perfect irrigation during surgery. I don't need any kind of key, so it's very user-friendly. And the guide has a perfect fit, and I can control it and test it, as we can see in this video. The specifically designed sleeves and reels are made specifically for the M-guide, and are not an adaptation of the conventional kit which is usual in other systems. The stop frame design makes that the drills will stop in the planed apical coronal position. The predictability of the outcome is my favorite part of this kind of procedure. So, for all these reasons, the real question is not why we should do it, but why shouldn't we do it? And for finish, I would like to point out that M Center will for sure help us planning our cases, but the planning validation is our responsibility. In my opinion, we should always start with the basics, first by doing freehand surgery and then upgrading to guided. What do I need a top-of-the-line kitchen stove if I'm not a good cook? It's so simple. For all of this, in my point of view, the digital hasn't come to take place of analogic. It is a partner and an excellent auxiliary. And it's here to stay. It's not the future, but the present. And both analog and digital can and should be together to obtain a precise and consistent final result. And that's it. Thank you, and I hope to see you again in our round table next Saturday. See you there.